Hello and welcome to today's class, Draw, Paint and Print. This term I want to start with some of the basic drawing exercises that we would have done last term and build upon those, getting you to work with different subject matter other than just often the still life subject matter that I work with you to begin with in class. And to reinforce and to make you realise just how important some of those basic drawing exercises are, and how they've really been the underpinning methodology of some of other artists' work in terms of how they draw. People like Matisse, even right back to earlier artists in the 17th and 18th century. The first exercise that we're going to revisit today is my old favourite, the contour drawing, which remembering that we add in that extra word to there, the blind contour drawing. So, where do we begin? So the blind contour is a line drawing that describes the edges of what you're looking at. It's about gaining an understanding of the shapes that you're looking at, and not just in a visual sense. An important part of all of these drawings that we do today are about feeling as well. You're feeling those edges with the pencil, because you have to really imagine that your pencil is not touching the paper, that it's touching that edge and following around that edge. So that sense of touch is something that you really need to keep in mind. Now, when I'm talking about contour, as I've explained to you all once before, it's about that edge where the object meets its surroundings. Now, I said to you before that I want you to start thinking about doing this with much more complicated subjects. In the past, we've done it just maybe with a single mug or a jug or things like that. I want you, and we have done it with Florence, and you're not all going to have a Florence sitting at home, but you could, as one possibility, sit there with a mirror and look at yourself and look at the blind and do your blind contouring of yourself, or maybe someone else at home. Your other alternative, and that will be as we're doing, as I'm working with Florence here, there's not only the contour here on the outside, but there are other contours that I can follow across the form here as well. And so possibly if you get a group of objects together, that could be the possibility of working then with some of those other contours that start to appear in amongst the greater outer contour. Another thing to think about is possibly looking at the landscape. And if you're looking at the landscape, of course, there are going to be contours and things, forms, shapes around that which you can follow and be doing those blindly. The landscape, of course, there's going to be a lot more happening and could be quite a long and sustained contour drawing with this exercise. But the biggest thing is thinking about, it's that idea of touching what you're looking at with your pencil. Now remember, we're not looking at the drawing that we're doing here, and whatever happens here actually in the end is not what's important. It's that experience and that training of the eye to be aware of the shapes of what things really are as opposed to what we think they are. So it's one of these key elements of observing the world around us. So touch, it's that observational element. And the third element, which I think is really important with the blind contour, is that element of that it's training the eye, the mind and the hand to be acting in unison with one another, so that you start to build up a confidence of that you know where your hand is, even if you can't see it and or where you're placing the pencil on the page. As I've said to you before, and I'm really very confident with that the more of these that you do, what will happen with the result on the page is that the drawings will get better and start to look more like what you're looking at. Some classic examples of then seeing this exercise done by artists and using it in their practice is Henri Matisse. And you see a lot of his drawings have the quality of a blind contour. So in terms of then his approach and then into his painting practice and into his other artwork, you can see those very felt shapes. They're observed, not just made up out of his own imagination. And he was an intense and very much an advocate of observation and drawing those things around him. Very, very passionate about certain objects and a great collector of ceramics and African masks and things, which he drew regularly, and with the model too. Would often have models in his studio that he'd be working from the model. There's some beautiful photographs by the photographer Brassai of Matisse at work, drawing with the model, and they're beautiful drawings. So remembering our process in terms of how we approach the blind contour is that we place the pencil on the page and we focus our eye on a position around the contour, and it's not until we're convinced that our pencil is touching that point that we can observe that when we start off on the contour. When you've completed that overall contour in the first, as I said, with some subject matter when you set it up, or with the subject matter how I want you to set it up, is that you'll find that there are other contours. So for instance, there is one that I could follow running around the hair there, round the eyebrow and down into there. There's another one that I could follow that runs along the brow, down along the nose, out and around, and then down here onto the lip, and then around and onto the chin there, that starts to define this part against this part. There's another one here that runs down from the hair, round the ear, down the jaw and down here. So there can be a lot of other contours that you can start to find, internal contours that you can follow and start to further enhance and build upon that drawing. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of an idea of remembering how to approach the blind contour. Hopefully you don't have as many distractions as I seem to have today, or helpers. And of course revisit the notes that I'll have given you last term or in previous years with drawing, if there's any of the finer points that you wanted to cover. So try and be thinking about a variety of different subject matter for your blind contours today, making that subject matter somewhat more complicated, and keeping those drawings as long and as sustained as you can. The longer these drawings take, the better. We'll now move on and look at the gesture drawing. The next drawing you're going to do is the gesture drawing. Gesture drawing is about drawing what is happening, or the action, the movement of what you're looking at. So it's not a drawing that's drawing the tangible object in front of you. It's again that emotional type of drawing, and that's when I've shown you that exercise about talking about emotional mark making, happy lines, sad lines, angry lines, etc. That it's thinking about those sort of things that help you get the gesture of what you're looking at. When you're doing a gesture drawing, it's not going to necessarily look like what you're looking at. There tend to be, and I would encourage you to keep them as very quick squiggles, moving the pencil around quite quickly on the page to begin with. Don't let them become too long. It's better to come up with a whole page with lots and lots and lots of different types of these gesture drawings than to sit there and just come out with one. So it doesn't matter in terms of the mark making that you use. You just let it be what feels right. And again, don't worry about it having to look like what you're looking at. They are drawings that sometimes you can look at again in the future and have no idea what they were. Some good examples of artists or an artist using the concept of gesture is the 18th century English artist George Romney. And I think his pen and ink drawings and pencil sketches are really amazing for the sense of movement and quite raw emotion that you see, and they're very quickly executed. They have a rapidity to them, and a confidence and a sureness to them that's really quite beautiful. Remember too how I describe that your signature is that idea, and is a good example of what the gesture is about. That your gesture is, or there is a gesture to your signature. You'll sign it again, your name again and again and again in our lifetime, and each time it will be different. But there is something about your signature that has an integral gesture to it that makes it your signature. So in terms of subject matter for this exercise, I encourage you to find something around you that is moving. And for me, I mean, it comes down to the cats and the ducks and those other things around me that don't stop moving at all, and encourage you to work quickly and keep that pencil moving and fill pages with drawings. The last exercise that I want to do with you is the modelled drawing. So this is that drawing where we're understanding and looking at the mass, the volume of what we're looking at. So in this case, I'm just going to use an apple just as a basic shape to begin with. A good artist, I think, to look at, and I mean, there's plenty of artists' drawings that you could look at that encapsulate the idea of modelling. But it's a really interesting one to look at are the drawings of Cézanne. Cezanne was very interested and was a great part of his painting practice was reproducing volume and modelling his subjects in planes of colour. So when you look at his drawings, which then are just purely with pencil and paper, you can see him working these drawings up and thinking about their weight and their roundness. And his marks that he uses are really quite interesting. There's these changes in weight as he's looking at the parts that receding from him and those parts that are coming towards him. And they're not purely just drawings that are about the lights and darks that are falling on the subject matter. It's him understanding and drawing the volume of the subject matter that he's looking at. So that's a key point when you're here talking about volume, or that I'm talking to you about this drawing, is that I'm not drawing, so for instance where I'm standing here, this half of the apple is light and this half of the apple is dark. I'm not trying to draw that. I'm trying to draw its roundness, and that's quite a different aspect. So you can approach this drawing by making any mark that you like. So it could be, you know, short stabby marks like that. It can be swirly marks, whatever suits you. I would be working with either a solid graphite or a crayon or something like that, Conti. I'm using here a thicker piece of graphite and something fairly soft too, so that you're able to make it go quite dark. Now the approach that I would, and the way you've got to be thinking is that again, your pencil or your material that you're using is touching the surface of the object that you're looking at. So when it's here close to you, and this is sort of the part of the apple here that's closest to me, is that I'm just gently touching the surface there. But to move the pencil I've got to imagine like I'm doing here, is that I've got to push away from me for my pencil to touch these parts that are further away. And that's what you need to do physically on the page, is push into the page. So the more pressure you apply, the darker the mark is going to be. So I would start with those areas that are the lightest, or that are then the closest towards you. Now you can be doing this sight size so that your drawing is the same size, but I'm just going to make it slightly bigger for the sake of this drawing, and start in the middle. So I'm just making some light sort of swirling marks around like this and starting to work it up and feeling those areas that are falling away from me and pushing into the paper, where I feel that my pencil would be going away from me. And just keep it moving, keep your pencil moving, keep your pencil moving, feeling around, feeling around. And this apple, it's a beautiful shape. It's got all these lovely lumps and bumps and angles and things. So it creates these, if I'm sort of feeling my way around, is that I am trying to get at that sense of that it's not perfectly rounded, that it has these gradations across it of form. Now, like any of these drawings that we've been doing, there's no right or wrong in terms of the finished result. And I encourage you to, not just do one and say, oh, there, I've done a model drawing, bang, is to repeat it and repeat it and repeat it either with the same subject matter is really good sometimes, or then be changing your subject matter and trying it in with another exercise. If we're thinking about it in terms of, you know, some of those marks, if you're looking at those Cézanne type sort of, you can see him pressing quite hard, and these flicky, shorter marks as he works like this around the form and understanding what he's looking at in that way. So as I said, there's very different approaches that you can take with the model drawing. Don't just be sticking with that style that I've done with the sort of swirly motion. Be also trying, you know, with different types of marks as well. And, you know, dots and things you could try as well. Change the material that you're using, change the type of pencil that you're using, and see if that you get a different result that way. That will do this week to get you going. Do as many of these as possible. Just keep doing them and doing them and doing them. If you're bored with them, do some more. These 3 exercises are really such important exercises, I think, and that they are the real basis of how a lot of artists have worked, and that they keep you working quickly, and they keep you really tuned in to seeing, rather than just relying on what you think or what you presume things are looking like. Good luck with the exercises, and I will see you soon.